Start again. Hey, it's Lee from the Blade Runner here. I'm just going to update my sharpening guide. The last one I did was years ago when it's dodgy as. Just like a lot of the things I do in the kitchen, to be honest. First things first, we're going to talk about stones. I always recommend starting on a coarse stone. There's three main categories: coarse, medium and fine. Coarse stone is anything up to 800, medium stones are like 1,000 to 2,000, and then you've got fine stones which are 3,000 plus. So majority of your work is going to be done on a coarse stone or a medium stone. Now if you've got a knife that's in pretty good nick, it's not too bad, hasn't been beaten up unlike most of mine, you can go straight to the medium stone. It's a good stone. The 1,000, 2,000 is really good for regular maintenance. If you're a chef or if you're just brutally bad at sharpening your knives like me, you just belt them up and then they're all blunt and you're like, oh geez, I'm gonna have to sharpen them all after I've ruined them all. Coarse stone is what I recommend, especially for chefs in the trade. So say this one, this is like my home knife at the moment. I'm actually going to take it into work next week. It'll do like maybe 10 minutes a day at home. And that's like on a good day 10 to half an hour if I'm meal prepping on the days off. Something that I take to work, it's going to get belted for maybe a minimum of 3 or 4 hours. It's going to get used regularly and all throughout the day, depending on whether it's a 6-hour short shift or a 12-hour shift. There's my alarm. So depending on your application, if you're a chef, I highly recommend starting on a coarse stone because there's a good chance your knife is going to be rounded and it's going to be fairly well used. So depending on what you're looking for and how bad your knife is, it's going to determine what stone you start on. I highly recommend starting on coarse stones and using an old knife to practice with if you're new to this. So if you're new, definitely get an old knife, something you don't care if you ruin. Don't get your good knife. Don't get the one you just bought if you just bought a new Japanese knife. Do not use it on the coarse stone and do not practice with it at first. Practice with a knife you don't care about, and then if you mess it up or if it doesn't work out, you've learned valuable you've had valuable lessons and you've learned how to sharpen a little bit, and then you can go and try your luck on your good knives. But I highly recommend getting a knife you don't care about, an old knife, and if that is the case, you definitely want to start on a coarse stone. If it's an old knife, it's a dull knife, you want to start on here. So with that said, let's talk about where to put your hands and why. There's two ways. I'm a lefty, so I sharpen like this. Now there's two main options. You can go sharpen on this side and then you're going to switch the knife and sharpen on the opposite. Now this is right-handed right now. I don't like this too much. I am best when I keep it on my left-hand side and keep the rolls of my hands the same. That being said, if you're going to keep it on one side and not learn to do it on both sides, which I think is harder, I think it's easier if you use just the one dominant hand. If that's the case, then you're going to sharpen this way, and then you're going to leave the handle on the same side of the stone and you're going to flip it over and it's going to go up that way. So they're your two main ways of sharpening. Again, depends on what you want to do, but again, I find that sharpening with the one dominant hand and having the same rolls on the hands, and we'll talk about the rolls in a second, that works best in my opinion, or in my circumstance. I'm not the greatest at right-handed. This is probably what you'll look like when you start. A little bit unsure, a little bit wobbly. But you can do it that way. It could be said that it's better to learn that way, but it's also a lot harder. Okay, so we've got where the hands are. So this hand that holds the handle is going to be kind of the lock-in hand. This one's going to maintain the angle. So with the angle, I have the index finger running along the spine and the thumb on the heel. With that, the other hand is going to be kind of the pushing hand. So it maintains the angle. This hand is going to maintain the pressure. And the pressure you want is kind of, you want to press the knife until your fingertips kind of change color. So in this case, it's going to go like that whitish color. You see your nail kind of change, underneath your nail change. So you don't want to drive all your shoulder into it, but you do want to see that color change in your fingers, and progressively that wants to get lighter. So on the coarse stone, we're going to use more pressure to remove metal. And then when we get to a polishing stone, we want to really back off that, because then we're refining the edge. But first things first, you want to get that pressure right. You just want to get enough pressure so that you see a color change in here. And then as you get more advanced, you can back off that pressure when you get into the higher grit stones. So you've got your hand controlling the angle, and the angles themselves are subject to debate. So people say it's like 2 pennies worth underneath the spine. So sit the knife flat, you kind of lift it up a little bit, and you want to get 2 pennies worth underneath the spine. Now, I'm not so concerned when people are learning as to what angle it is. This angle is going to be easier to achieve, but it's also going to go more dull faster because it's more obtuse. And then if you go super flat, that's going to take longer to achieve. It may be sharper, but it'll also be it'll be more brittle, right? Because there's less metal behind it. And it's like that real shape. And compared to that, that's going to be a lot stronger. That's like, you know, most people can understand that concept. So the main thing with angles when you're starting is consistency. So again, if you think about that kind of triangle shape that we're trying to achieve, the tip of a knife, if it's rounded or it's not straight, you're not going to get, it's just not going to penetrate food as easily. So the main thing is consistency. Choose an angle and try and replicate it on the other side. That's one of the main concepts with sharpening. I find people start to get results when they get consistent angles. So you can play around with your angles, and some people do. Once, if you get really into it, people will be like, oh, 20 degree, and there's all these gadgets you can get. But I generally find the more you sharpen, the more you figure out what you do and don't like. So we've got our one hand controlling the angle, the other one's going to push and control pressure. And what that pressure is going to be, it's going to be edge trailing pressure. And what I mean by that is, here's the edge, we're going to push away from the edge. We're going to apply pressure when the edge is trailing. You do not want to apply pressure when you're coming back, or you can when you get more sophisticated. But what tends to happen if you put like if I add a whole bunch of pressure coming in here, you tend to gouge the stone. And that creates a whole bunch of problems in itself. Gouged stone will be like a speed bump whenever you're sharpening, or to get rid of that, you're going to have to remove a whole bunch of your stone, especially if your stones are expensive like this one, the Naniwa Chosera. Really not ideal. And then the other thing is it can also dig in and create, you know, you could have an accident, or you could hurt yourself, worst case scenario. But so if I'm sharpening this way, I'm pushing away from myself with the pressure, or ideally. And then if I'm like this, I'm going to be applying pressure when I'm dragging it towards me, because that's edge trailing. So yeah, the concept is edge trailing pressure. Edge trailing pressure, regardless of what side you're sharpening on. Okay, so, and then I suppose we really need to talk about what we're looking for, and what is the whole goal. So it's a pretty simple concept when you think about it. I'll see if I've got a little bit of paper here, but I might just put an overlay on this on the video. But you basically, an old knife this is going to be like a huge exaggeration, but an old knife is going to be rounded and it's not going to penetrate food, and that kind of, you know, that's a pretty simple concept. Sorry, the video just stopped for some reason there. So we're going to remove metal from both sides to make the knife tip apex. Pretty simple concept. But what are we looking for when we sharpen? What we're looking for is what's called a burr. So when I sharpen here on this side, oops, so you can see it, sharpen here, what happens is there's this little thing called a burr or a wire, or there's a whole bunch of different names for them, but you can't see it, but there's a little bit of metal that flicks over when you sharpen that, when you apex that side. And that's called a burr. That's what we're looking for. That is it's at the tactile indication that you've apexed that one side. You can't see it, but you can feel it. And the way in which you test for it, don't run your thumb down the knife, please do not. What you want to do is kind of go from the spine down, and what you want to do and check for is like a little wire. Now, I'm actually, just from sitting here and talking and all the rest, I can feel there's a little burr there already. So this knife might not be too bad. And I think if you look up closely, you can see this is a carbon steel knife, so this is really easy to see where I've already started to take off metal. One of those tricks is to use a permanent marker. So I'll see if I can do this quickly, but we'll apply permanent marker. Oh, I've got it wet already. Apply permanent marker to the edge. Now be very careful when you do this, but you can apply permanent marker, and that way you've got like a visual indication of where you're removing steel. If I can get the camera to focus, okay. So see, I've made a few texture marks along there. Okay. Now, maintain the angle, get the angle right. I'm going to use my right hand as pressure hand, and I'm going to work my way down the knife in sections. Now, when you do it, when you're starting, you're going to be going a lot slower. You do not want to go fast. You want to be consistent and build speed. You don't want to be fast and inconsistent. Like I said, consistency is one of those, indicators. Normally, an indicator of I've got a little chip out of there. Consistency normally provides results when it comes to sharpening. Now, if I can get this to focus. Yeah, so we can see that permanent's been removed. Permanent marker. So when you're starting, permanent marker along there is a really good way to see where you're getting contact, especially when it comes to the tip. So when you're going along the knife, work in sections. Yep, that one's good. And you don't have to walk your fingers down. You can just literally stop, reposition, and that's how I started. And with the heel takes a little bit more, apply a little bit more pressure. I use my thumb and my two fingers there. The heel outside of the tip is the hardest place to sharpen. The tip is harder because if you just go along in that same angle, what happens is you tend to dip off and you don't get full contact with the tip. What you have to do, and what I do, is this hand has to slightly rise. Now, not much, it's just a small amount. It's like a ½ inch or an inch, but what that allows is for you to get full contact with the tip, and that's where the permanent marker is really good, is because you'll see where you've taken off steel and where you haven't, and there's nothing more annoying than not getting that full contact with the tip. I think this side's looking pretty good, if I'm being honest. If I can get it now, it's focusing on something down there. If I can get this to focus, you can see, because it's a carbon steel knife, you can see where I've taken off metal. Now that's pretty good, and I'm getting a burr. If I run my finger along here, I'm getting it pretty much all the way along. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's switch it over and let's do this side quickly. Now, the coarse steel is or the medium, wherever you start, is going to be like where you spend I think a large majority of your sharpening time. So like for me, this is going to be a good 60% of the whole process is just putting this groundwork in. Is getting the angles right, getting the knife to apex. And then from there, the refinement part I find is quite quick. So same, I'm going to focus on that heel, work down in sections, try and maintain the angle the best I can, and then lift up a little bit for the tip. Now I do break a rule for the tip. I tend to not use the whole stone because I find it gives me the best results, but you really shouldn't do what I did there. You should try and use the whole stone and wear it down evenly. Just looking at that tip, and because it's carbon steel, I can see if I can get it to focus. Yeah, you can see it's a little bit in the shadow there, but so how are we here? The burr there, that's looking pretty good if I'm being honest. I'll give this another pass. Yeah, I am pretty happy with that side. So that has burred on both sides, and now we have a knife that is apexing again. What I do before I move up to the next progression is a little thing called stropping, and same concept as the leather strop at the end, where you go 1 for 1 on each side, and you want to try and maintain those angles that you've already established. This is super important. Do not miss this. What this normally does is removes those little bits of metal that are on the end, the little burrs that we can feel. This tends to knock them off. Now, not always. Sometimes some people like run the knife through cardboard, and again, you can put it on a strop. I'll do that at the end, to be honest. But that, I've got a strop here. This is an old Black's Blades one, actually, an Australian knife maker. So I'm just going to quickly strop on here. So this is a 400 Naniwa Chosera, not a medium stone, not a fine grit stone. That is a Chosera. Now, I am pretty confident that is, like, paper's not even an issue. Let me go get some. I'm just going to step away. I'm going to grab some newspaper because I think this Tadafusa knife, newspaper. Now that is on, there's actually a little chip there. I don't think you can see that, but it actually, the newspaper's showing up the chips. Look, sorry, I wasn't in front of the camera. That's a 400 grit stone. I have not even moved to the 1000 yet. This is why I go on about coarse stones to anyone who's dumb enough to listen, is I think they are underrated and underused. If you use them properly, you can get good results. Now, you don't want to go overboard with them because you're going to grind down the knife. You're removing metal. You can't stick it back on. So you're gonna if you overuse it, you're gonna take away. Is that you turning? Oh, it's my wife turning on the air conditioning. If you use a coarse stone too much, you're going to remove a lot of metal. If you're in a kitchen, that might not matter to you. You don't care. But if you overuse it, you can wear down your knife prematurely. And a thick knife, or a thick knife behind the edge, if you know if that makes sense. Get this to focus. If a knife, as it moves down, it becomes thicker. So if you sharpen a whole bunch, that knife's going to get thicker behind the edge. It's going to perform worse, basically. So you don't want to overuse this, but for results, especially if you're a professional in a kitchen, 100% use a coarse stone. You'll start getting some good results within a short amount of time. Now, we've apexed on the coarse stone, and then all we really have to do now is repeat that same process all the way up. all the way through the progression. So onto a medium stone. This is a 2000 Naniwa Chosera. Again, I love Naniwa because they're like giant stones. They're expensive, but they're actually really good value when you think about how much stone. I think the Sharpens is like almost half the width of this one, but these ones also come on a big stand, which is, it's literally glued to the stand, so it gives me lots of clearance. You can use sink bridges and other contraptions. I don't like it personally. I work hunched over a bench all day long. The sink I find makes me lean further forward than I'd like to, than I feel is comfortable. The sink bridges are good for like a lack of mess. Like all good for cleaning up, and it's easy to contain the mess, but I prefer just a stone holder and a bench top, if I'm being honest. Or this is a weird old discontinued Tojiro one, but it's essentially just a stone holder. And with these Naniwas, you don't even really need that. You could just put some of the kind of matting underneath to help hold it in place, and away you could go. So same concept. Work down the knife, try and maintain angles, and this is on the 2000 on the medium grit. Again, if you have a really well looked after knife, you can just jump straight to this one. But if you have a really dull knife, what you're going to find is you're going to spend a whole bunch of time on this medium grit, and you're going to feel like you're not going anywhere. That's, I think, one of the biggest problems is I see people buy 1000 grit stones, and they spend 10 minutes on the 1000 grit stone, and they don't get results because the knife hasn't apexed, and that can be super infuriating because you feel like you're going nowhere, and it's probably because you're not using the correct stone. So good to start with, or if you know what you're doing, if you're a bit more of a seasoned, if you're a bit more experienced in sharpening, with this knife I probably could have gone straight to the medium, because it seems, I thought it was worse off than this. It was actually quite quick to sharpen. But I'm so close to finishing this one on the medium. Now you can see the slurry building up. That's no issue at all. If it starts to get, you can wash it away if you want, but a lot of the time it helps, within reason, helps the sharpening. If it goes dry and pasty, obviously add some water, or you can remove it, but it's starting to get too thick for my liking, so I'll add a tiny bit of water, but I don't remove it. Slurry is your friend, and it's also like a bit of an indication that you're removing metal. So that is, yeah, the burr on this is not going to be as pronounced. It's not going to be as obvious or as tactile as the coarse stone. It'll be a little bit more subtle, but with a little bit of practice you'll get used to feeling it. Again, run your thumb from the spine down towards the edge if you want to test that burr. Do not run it along the edge of the knife. I do not recommend that. Yep, okay, so that's burred on both sides. And I'm going to do what I did before, the exact same thing, strop, before moving to the next progression. This it has benefits for different stages, but I would again highly recommend that you strop. Now that is already starting to shave hair. I haven't even got to a polishing stone. I don't know if you can see if it's focusing yet. So I haven't even got to a polishing stone. I've already got hair shaving results. It's not like hair blasting. It's not. You can tell when the knife is really sharp. It really pops the hairs. But that is not too bad. We are looking good, to be honest. I won't go any further. I want to, but for the sake of this video, I will not. Now the medium stone does a little bit of both. It removes metal and it polishes. Now I am going to go to, I think it's a 4,000. 4,000 grit stone. And this is a bit of a strange progression, but again, as long as you kind of tick those boxes between the of the coarse, medium and fine, I generally find it works. You could go a little bit higher if you were doing a 2,000. You would step it up to say something like around the 5,000, but at the time I wanted to 1,000, they were out of stock, and I was like, you know what, 2,000 is not that much of a difference. It really isn't, and it does the trick. And then I wouldn't go from a 2,000 to a 3,000. I'd at least go to a 4,000 or a 5,000. But again, as long as you stay within that range, as in like one in each category, coarse, medium or fine, I almost guarantee you'll get good results. I'm going to try and use less pressure on the fine grit stone, and we are going to do the exact same thing we did on all the other stones. So try and maintain the angle, work down the knife, elevate the handle hand for the tip, try and maintain edge trailing pressure, and if you look on the stone you should be able to see the slurry building up. So I'm going to do a quick pass on both sides. Trying to use all the stone. And then just like before, I'm going to strop on the fourth, whatever it is, 5,000, can't even remember, before I actually strop on the leather strop. When you're using the leather strop, it's actually not as imperative that you maintain those angles. You can be a little bit more aggressive, so I actually elevate the knife a little bit more with the strop, and always edge trailing pressure with the strop. You will find out, if you don't do it correctly with the strop, you'll find out very quickly. You'll cut into the strop and you'll damage it. So very important with edge trailing pressure with the strop. And I have a feeling that that is shaving hair very easily. So like I said, I think the majority of my time was spent on the coarse stone. Same technique, just moving through the progression of stones. I don't think it's an overly complicated process. Some people pick it up quicker. If you're a tradie and you're using your hands all day, every day, you're probably going to pick up the concept quicker than someone who maybe sits on a computer, but I think it's achievable. And again, as long as you're looking for that tactile burr and you're using the correct stone, like I said, the reason I put together the sets that I do is because I think that coarse stone always gets missed, and it's so important, especially if you're a professional, if you're a chef like me. Really important, because your knives will, good chance that they're going to be fairly rounded, or if you're just lazy like me and you never sharpen your knives. you know, you're going to want to start on the coarse stone. So I think that's about it. I think that's the only other thing I haven't mentioned is about flattening stones. If you don't flatten your tones, your whetstone tends to get dished out. Oh, here we go. Let's get some water in here. It tends to get dished out, and what I mean by dished out is it's not flat. I don't know if it's obvious for some people, it seems obvious to me, but you need a flat surface to work off to get consistent results. If it's all dished out and uneven, you're not going to get a consistent edge. So what we do to flatten, you get I highly recommend the Atoma. I don't actually have them in stock at the moment. They're so popular. They're a little bit expensive. They can be more expensive than the Whetstones, but they do not dish out. These things are great. And then mine is so old and so well used. You can get replacements. I sell replacements. You can put another, if for some reason in 5 or 10 years you burn through this and it's lost, the diamonds have all lost their bite, you can get a replacement for it. So these things are really cool. I highly recommend them. A lot of sharpeners swear by them, and I also do. We're going to get a pencil, put grid marks across the stone, and then we're going to use the Atoma plate until they disappear. This stone's pretty flat because I maintain it fairly well, so that only took me 2 seconds. But even if your stone's really bad, I've seen some super bad stones, this thing will have it flat in like 5 minutes. Really cool, totally worth it. This is probably the most underrated product apart from the coarse stone, in my opinion. You normally just round off the edges too, so it doesn't scratch your knife when you're using the Atoma. I suppose you can do those. I don't worry about them personally. I try to stay away from that area. But that is it. That's you. Apply for the coarse stone. You can apply a little bit of pressure with the 140 Atoma plate. Just be careful if you're using a polishing stone with the 140. You do not want to gouge that or micro gouge it. Do not go super hard. If you're going to use this product on, there's my alarm. If you're going to use this product on a polishing stone, please, very light pressure. This is a 2000, but if you're going to use it on a polishing stone, almost just like shimmy it back and forth with your hands. Don't drive a whole bunch of pressure into it. It'll micro gouge the stone, and the stone won't work as well because it creates like all these little scratches in the stone. So you don't want to do that. In the coarse stone, the grit is too big for that to be an issue. In the polishing stones, it does become an issue if you push too hard. So really lighten off the pressure, the same way you do with sharpening with the Atoma stone. Exact same concept. Lower the grit, you can go a bit harder, and as you move along, you go back off that grit, back off that pressure, so that you don't ruin the stones, because you can potentially not ruin them. I suppose you can re-flatten them, but yeah, what happens is it stops the stone from giving you results. It's really not good, and then you're putting it on here and you're not getting results, and it's like it may as well not use it. So yeah, back off the pressure. As long as you use super light pressure, don't use it. I don't recommend putting pressure on the polishing stones. Just shimmy it back and forth, and these stones don't wear very fast. Coarse stones will wear a lot faster because you're doing the majority of your work on here. These polishing stones, they shouldn't be having a lot of pressure, and they last a very long time. I've gone through many coarse stones over the years. I think I've got every single polishing stone I've ever had. I haven't gone through one. So yeah, that's I think that's about all the tips and tricks I have as far as sharpening go. If I've missed anything, or you know of anything, any ideas, any questions, please pop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear some feedback or some tricks that work for you. Anything that I've missed, I'm more than happy to entertain those. Thanks very much.